Alright, before we go too much further, I'm just going to go over some of the basic stuff that I'm going to probably be using on this. Starting off with just your basic average RC tools. I got a Phillips head in there, a couple Allen wrenches, little nut driver to take wheels off if I need to. Got your average X-Acto knife, spare blades, tape measure, ruler. The only reason I have a tape measure is because it's a little tricky to get into the inside sometimes, so you can make the tape measure as long as you want. It's not always 12 inches long. Got a pencil for marking, eraser, a file, both flat and a round one. I've bent the back end of my round file because this table isn't 100% level and I like it to stay where I put it when I put it down on the table. I've got a razor knife. This is probably something some people haven't actually seen. Let's see if I can focus in on the blades. Alright. It's actually a fine-tooth saw. It's probably about 30 TPI, maybe a little bit more. Hacksaw blade would work, or even a regular old handsaw of some sort, like a back saw. I've actually got a jig for mine that allows me to cut 30 and 45s fairly easy. Got a pair of side cutters and needle nose pliers. Also got a couple of forceps and tweezers. Not sure if I need that many, but they're always handy to have around, and if you forget where you put one, it's always nice to have a spare. Got some sandpaper. I've got both 180 and 120 grit here. I usually end up just using the 180. Also got a roll of masking tape, painter's green. Any local hardware store will have it. Comes off easy, doesn't leave a residue usually, unless you leave it on for like 3 weeks. Okay, I've also got a pin vise and a couple of spare drill bits. I've got more drill bits, but you don't want to see a whole table full. Got some styrene cement. See if I can get a good shot of this one. This is the stuff most of you guys will probably be able to find easy at your local hobby supplier, but I prefer to actually use this one. Not as easy to find, but it's, in my opinion, better. It doesn't evaporate as fast, so it allows you a little bit more time to work with. Also melts a little bit better. What I actually do though is I have this cement in this container. They are compatible. They're very similar in what they're made out of. This brush in this bottle is better than this one, especially when you're doing large pieces. It helps you out. I've also got a couple of little cheapy dollar store wood chisels. These aren't the strongest metal in the world, but they come in handy for like scraping little pieces of glue or just the edges and stuff. Helps you carve a little bit. I got a block of wood. It's actually a tool, it's not just a piece of wood. It is flat, 3/4 inch spruce plywood, and it's cut about 5-6 inches long, 90 degrees on each side. This helps when I'm gluing stuff up, just to keep it square and flat. Now further down the line, this stuff. This is a basic plastic body filler. You can get this at your local hobby shop, made by Tamiya. Comes in a couple of different kinds based on how well it sands. Now I like using this stuff, but I wouldn't recommend buying this. I would buy this. Virtually the same stuff, and this tube costs the same as this tube. This will last me the rest of my life. This might not get me through this build. This one you can find at most paint stores. Might not be able to find it at a local hardware store like your Home Depot or even a Lowe's or anything like that, but you can definitely find it at like a General Paint or a Benjamin Moore. All you're looking for is a glazing putty. You could probably go in and ask anyone at the local paint store what they would use for a filler, a fine filler. Now further down the line, we're also going to need some paints and a couple paint brushes. When I get to painting, I'll go over the sizes that I use. There are some sizes that I prefer for doing detail rather than just any old random brush off a shelf. So here's the idea of what we're doing so far. We're making a second one of these. It's not going to be exactly the same as this. It's going to be some modifications. I've got a bunch of pictures that I took off Instagram. Helped me build this one. There was a couple of details that I really liked on some of the cars that I saw that I didn't get a chance to put on this one. So I'll probably work on some of those details on this. Anyways, let's get started back building again. Okay, so this is where we're at. I've got this little front grille made. Still not attached, but I gotta figure out where I'm gonna stop it. I'm thinking I'm probably going to end up coming past here and I'm going to try and tie it into these two holes right here. Now I got to think a little bit on the grander scheme of things on how it's actually going to tie in back when we hit this section of the car, because this section is actually going to be a lot wider than the front. It's pretty narrow back here, but it's going to be a wide car back here. Same as your average 31 coupe or so. So I've got to make this taper as it comes from here to here. And you see that line that is along the bottom of this chassis? I'm probably going to try and duplicate that in some fashion. I'll probably be a little bit outside of it so you don't see any of it. But that's the line that I'm looking to get with the front of this. Alright, got a couple of pieces cut. There's only one sitting here. The other one's actually taped onto the side of there. It's not glued yet, but I just figured I'll show you how I'm aiming to do this. If you look at where the front grille sits, it's on a little bit of an angle this time, but that little piece has to clear some of the mechanicals on this rig. I've got this little piece of orange that I've got to come around, and then I've got my shock tower that I can't hit right here. So that's why it's kind of tapered as it goes up. It's only first layer. I'm going to try and sand down the edges of this, so I'm going to go with 2 layers on this, and I'm going to probably come up and across the back before I come back. Another shot of where I'm at. Up and over top the shock towers. Another piece on top behind. This is going to form the top of this fairing. And there's nothing fancy about any of these radiuses or anything. This was actually the top of this. So no dimensions, sort of evolutionary building here. Okay, I've got that back piece on, and I've also gone and I've actually doubled up a couple of these edges just to make them a little stronger. And sort of in my journey here, I've actually attached this to the plate that mounts into the front of this car. So this actually just slides in. Let's see if I can do it with one hand here. Get a video of it. Yeah. Slides in like that, comes up and over top, and I've got the front end of it looking like this. My next step is to make some more strips, and I'll show you what I'm going to do for across here. Okay, got another couple pieces here. There's 3 actually for each side of this. And these are the 3 for the left side, and I've already taped these 3 into the right side. Now they're not real tight yet, but as you put them on you can kind of twist them and push them tight to this front frame. Okay, this thing's glued up. It's a little bit rough right now. Still needs a little bit of sanding, and I need to trim off some of those edges. The styrene weld type cement that I'm using takes a couple of minutes to dry or actually set back up again, because it actually turns the plastic into a liquid. I don't know if you can see in right in here how it bubbles out. Where are we? It bubbled out. I'm going to trim all of this off, and I need to wait a little bit before I can actually attack this with a knife again. So I'm going to try and trim off some of these, and I'll do a couple on video so that you can see what I'm doing and how to get the effect I'm looking for. See if I can get the right angle on that. All I'm doing is scoring along the edge with an X-Acto knife. Let's see. Hard to get the camera in here. Okay. So I'm just scoring that multiple times. If you score it enough, it will actually score all the way through, and you won't actually have to break it or cut it off in any other way. But basically you score it, and that was this one. This is what I use my needle nose pliers for mostly, and it just kind of snaps off, and it's fairly flush now. I'll give that a quick sand. I'll cut the rest of these off, and then I'll show you what I'm doing on the top to sort of trim this out. I'm going to have to sand some of this down before I go to the next step too. Okay, all sanded down here, and I've got a couple of more strips. Part of the reason I work in strips like this is they have a tendency to twist easy, right? Like you can actually twist that. Let's see if I can get a good line on it. This way, and they bend good this way, better than they do in a wider piece. So I'll put a couple of layers across the top of this, and this will actually smooth this whole thing out. Right? I won't have these segments all the way along the top of that anymore. Okay, it's all sanded up, and as you can see, it already just slides into place, right? I'm going to probably mount it from the back side too, but I'll make that mount on this part of the chassis, and I'll screw it in from the back side this way. Now, the next step in sort of smoothing this all out, I don't know if it picks up on video, but there's some minor blemishes still. The next step is actually this stuff. This big tube is filler. Now, I don't need very much of this, but I'm going to need enough to sort of smear it around. Might take 2 coats. Takes a little bit of time to dry, so I'll have to leave this for an hour, maybe 2. But all I'm going to do is basically smear it all over this thing, anywhere that looks like might be some sort of a crack, or something that might show through paint. If there's one thing I do know about painting anything, it's 90% prep work, and this is prep. So I'm going to get this thing all filled up, get all the little cracks filled, and probably sand it, and I'll come back and show you a finished product. Okay, so it's all primered up here. I normally shoot most of my trucks in black, or at least I prime in black if I'm doing a hard body. It's easier to go lighter, I find, but we'll get into that more when I start painting. I shot this one in white just because it shows up a little bit better on camera. Like, this thing isn't 100% perfect, but I think you kind of get the idea. It'll be coming down the road at somebody, like kind of like that, a couple lights off to the side. And the reason I shot white onto this was just a regular old flat white Rust-Oleum paint, is because you can pick up a lot of the detail. See where that little corner there is kind of chipped out? I'll have to go back and re-putty that. There's some more over here. The top end actually looks pretty good. I'd pick this up in full detail, but it's still a little bit tacky from painting. Gives you a quick idea of what you can do in a couple hours. It's actually taken me longer to do video setups and download to YouTube than it did to actually make this thing. Okay, one last look how it actually looks on the car. It's got a little bit of an angle to the back, give it a little bit more of an aggressive stance. It's got a nice angry looking grill on it, I think. It's fairly easy. Bolts into the chassis on the underside here, right? And it will probably be bolted in somewhere back here. And I'll hopefully get another couple of videos up here in the next week or two to show you how that's going to happen. I'll do that when I build the engine. I'll see if I can get that one on video too. Anyways, hope it helps, hope it inspires you. Give it a shot. It might be fun.